Hello friends, this is Otz, and today I'm going to be giving you a bad build for every single killer in Dead by Daylight. Now, if you've watched my video where I cover every single perk in the game and tell you how good or how bad they are, you can watch it right over there. You'll know that there are a ton of bad perks for killer in this game. I'm not just going to slap any 4 random of those perks onto each killer. I'm instead going to be giving you a good sample of which perks that might be otherwise good, situationally good, or even excellent, actually don't work so well on specific killers. If you're new to the game, if you're new to playing killer, this will teach you what perks you should avoid running and why, give you a good idea of what you should go for instead. And if you are a very experienced killer, there might be something that you haven't considered, so you might still learn something from this video. Let's get on to it. On top of that, by the way, I'm going to be showing you what I think is the ugliest cosmetic that I own for each of the killers, in case you're curious. So, yeah, we'll begin with the Trapper. Now, you might be a bit surprised about the perks I'm going to show you on him. Let's begin. The first perk you should probably not run on Trapper is the perk Enduring. It's not uncommon to run this perk. You know, you unlock, obviously, killers by default. Enduring is part of those perks that you're gonna have if you play the default killers. It is not a horrible choice on Trapper if you've got absolutely nothing else, but why would you not want to run Enduring on Trapper? Very simple. Enduring is for those moments where you're almost about to hit and the survivor doesn't really know if he's about to drop the pallet. Well, this lets you recover if you get stunned. You fear no pallet. The thing is, this killer already has a built-in Enduring ability that you can use. If you have a trap on your hand, when you get close to a pallet and you have a good idea that the survivor is about to drop it, one very simple and effective thing you can do is to precisely time your trap placement as he drops the pallet. This makes your hitbox retract back, I believe, and makes you immune to the stun that would normally hit you when you're at that distance. Meaning that if you anticipate the drop of the pallet, what you can do, you know you're not going to hit the hit, right? You can just start placing the trap and either cancel it right away, and then it's like you had Enduring. You completely avoid the stun and you can go around and hit him, or commit to putting it on the ground, and now that that pallet is perfectly trapped, and obviously the survivor needs to go away, and someone else that goes there in the next chase could step on it. So I wouldn't recommend Enduring on him. If you learn how to play around this, this perk would be almost worthless. Next up is Ruin. Now, the way Ruin used to work, it was easily one of the best, if not the best perk on Trapper. You would spawn, survivors would all spawn really far away, you would set a few traps here and there, survivors were all immediately on gens, and it affected all of them. That was great. It bought you time at the start where Trapper needs it most. However, the new Ruin doesn't really work like that anymore. The new Ruin makes it so that when you interrupt people from working on generators, either by going there yourself and pushing them off, or by, you know, hooking someone far away and forcing them to come to you for one reason or another, then Ruin begins to make that generator regress passively. Very quickly, but, you know, passively. This does not work with some of the playstyle that you'll be doing with Trapper. If you start the match and you want to set up a few traps at the start, let's say you want to set up 3 or 4 traps at the start, Ruin will do absolutely nothing for you. The first 2 gens are gonna just blow up in the distance. They're just gonna be done really, really quickly. You will not be interrupting them. So this perk they will not even realize you have it. And then by the time they realize you have it, they might have already explored half the map and had a good chance of cleansing it. For this reason, if you're a very, very aggressive Trapper and you want to run Ruin, maybe with another Hex perk or maybe with some other gen control perk like Surveillance, if you're a very, very aggressive Trapper, then by all means run it. You could always trap it and defend it later if you're lucky. But if you want to set up at the start, Ruin could very well do nothing for you. So keep that in mind. The other perk that you would think would be a good choice on Trapper would be Monitor and Abuse. Monitor and Abuse reduces your terror radius by 8 meters when you're not in a chase. So you go from the normal 32 to 24, which is really nice. And it increases it during a chase. Now, for a killer that needs to place traps while people aren't aware, who needs to be surreptitious, you might think this is a pretty good deal, right? Wrong. This is actually quite, can really, really backfire on Trapper, and I do not recommend it. First of all, your biggest enemy as Trapper, the perk that counters you the most is Object of Obsession. Object of Obsession is a perk that allows any survivor that has it to see you from a distance, through walls, through tiles, through objects, through hills, through anything. And they can do it from a distance of like up to from 56 to 62 meters, I believe. They can do it from really far away. And the nice thing about Object is that they cannot do it while they are in your terror radius. So there are some instances where if the object is in a building, you can get close to the building and set up some traps around the building. And because the terror radius is already enveloping the survivor, he cannot see you anymore. With monitoring abuse, your terror radius becomes even smaller. And that means that the object will be able to see you from up to very, very close. Making this strategy, which is one of your counters to Object, even harder to use. Basically, with Monitor, you're giving them a better range to the really, really strong perk, and that's enough to make this perk a bad choice for Trapper in most situations. Another thing that will mess with you occasionally is your playstyle. As a Trapper, you will very often be very, very territorial, and having an unpredictable terror radius can actually backfire. It is not uncommon to put someone in the basement, then walk outside, then set up a few traps around the basement or around the corner of the map where you've kind of gotten them stuck. Someone runs into you, your terror radius now becomes 40 meters, and you have to worry about borrowed time triggering up to 40 meters away. That's happened to me, and it is very, very, very annoying. Let me just put it that way. The other perk that you should probably avoid as Trapper, unless you really know what you're doing, is Rancor. Now, the first thing that Rancor does is it creates an obsession. If you're gonna run an obsession perk on Trapper, it shouldn't be done so lightly. You should pick a really, really good obsession perk on Trapper, such as Save the Best for Last. Otherwise, don't bother. The Trapper is a very, very territorial killer, as I've said. It will not be uncommon for you to have to quote-unquote tunnel survivors sometimes. You put someone in the basement, they get rescued, they step out of the basement, they immediately step on a trap. What are you supposed to do? Ignore them? Probably not. You probably want to hook them again, or at least try to. If they don't have any obsession perks, you will know, and you have non-obsession perks yourself, you will know that there's no decisive strike. You can immediately pick that person up and have absolutely no fear, make the best choice available. If you have an obsession perk, you will never ever know if the survivors are running the decisive strike or not. So if you pick that person from your trap that just step after being unhooked, you don't know what you're in for. So that's one thing. But the biggest problem with this perk is that it will show your aura to a survivor randomly for 3 seconds. And that's sometimes something that you don't really want to... That's an information that you don't always want to give the survivor. Not to mention that the survivor will know that you have this ability, and they will get warned at the end of the game. Probably a bad choice on Trapper, unless you, again, you know exactly what you're doing and you play very aggressively, in which case it wouldn't be that big of a deal. Let's go to the next killer, the Wraith. And look at his beautiful pantaloons. Right. So, Monitor and Abuse. This is a perk that can work in some killers for sure. Why would you not want to run it on the Wraith? Well, very simple. On Wraith, you're probably going to be doing two things. One, moving around with a terror radius until you're sneaking up to a survivor. And two, chasing the survivor very briefly, getting a hit, and then usually going away immediately and cloaking again. Or sometimes following up the chase and ending it soon if the situation allows it. This means that Monitor and Abuse is only going to work in the negative. It's only basically going to make your terrors bigger. Because when you're not in a chase, when you're cloaked, the perk is... You already have a 0 terror radius. This perk will do absolutely nothing for you. Don't run it. It will not help you. Other perks will be better. Next up is Lightborn. Now, this is a perk that some people ask, is this good on Wraith? Lightborn protects you very, very heavily from flashlights. Flashlights normally take... a set amount of time to blind you. With this perk, they take double, and it basically makes it impossible to blind a killer unless you have 2 people aiming at them at the same time, or some other crazy stuff like that. They'll usually have time to look away, finish the animation they're doing, and look away. It makes blinding a killer near impossible. So some people believe that if they put this on, the Wraith will also be immune to being burned, which is a mechanic exclusive to pretty much exclusive to the Wraith. Where when you're in your cloak mode, when you're in stealth, people aim at your body with a flashlight, and if they manage to follow you enough, they will stun you for a few seconds. Lightborn does not protect you from this. So if you're going to use it for that reason, please do not. You will still get burned out of it. This is just for the flashlights that are aimed at your face in order to blind you. Next up, we got Brutal Strength. Again, Brutal Strength comes from the Trapper, so if you're playing the base killer, it's very likely that you could have this perk on your Wraith. It is not a horrible perk, don't take me wrong, but there are two things about this perk that you might think are a good idea that are certainly not. One, Brutal Strength helps you to break a pallet after a survivor has thrown it and catch up to them a little bit quicker. That is not the playstyle you want to do. You want to be doing with Wraith. With Wraith, you want to be sneaky, you want to hit, and then you want to run. You do not want to commit overly to one person, even if they're giving you really good pallets. That's not your strength. If gens fly too quickly in the distance, it doesn't matter if there's no pallets. You still won't be able to insta down anybody. And take advantage of that. You need to get hits, you need to get people injured, you need to create a little bit of chaos and get everybody confused. And Brutal Strength doesn't play into that playstyle very much at all. Another thing that Brutal Strength users on Wraith often do is pair it with one of his fun add-ons called Shadow Dance, one of the varieties of Shadow Dance. Shadow Dance increases your break-in speed, very much like Brutal Strength, by a ton. And because you see them being very rare, green and purple, you might think that this combination is like incredibly good. It is not. These add-ons only work when you're cloaked, and when you're cloaked, for the most part, you're a useless chasing machine. It is absolutely not worth it. Wraith has good add-ons. Those are not any of them, mind you. Don't pair them with Brutal Strength, other than if you're going for a meme build. And then we've got Whispers. Whispers is actually a fantastic tracking tool. Most killers don't have the ability to hide their terror radius. They have to commit to go into one area, right? So if I'm a trapper or say a huntress, I go to an area, everybody knows I'm coming, especially a huntress because she's got a loud lullaby that reaches really far. And I need to know if going to that area, if that commitment that I'm making is a good idea or not. And if Whispers turns on, then I'm like, okay, good chance someone's here. I might be able to try and find them. You do not need Whispers on Wraith. Wraith moves very quickly when he's cloaked, even more so with add-ons. And you are going to find survivors that in the open, basically. You don't need Whispers at all to try and figure out their location. Your speed allows you to actually know where someone is and take a little bit of a second to go from an extra angle. Other perks for detection will help you a ton more, namely Nurse's Calling, namely Barbecue and Chili, Discordance even. Pick other perks over Whispers. Still not a bad choice, but you will never have the problem of survivors hearing your terror radius and hiding, which is where Whispers kind of shines, where it's letting you know someone's here, look a little bit harder. You will not have that kind of problem. So I do not recommend Whispers over the other perks. Let's go over to our next killer. Our next killer is Billy, and he's looking hella fly. And the first perk I will not recommend on him would be, first of all, insta-down perks, and make your choice in particular. Because of his high mobility and his ability to come back to a hook extremely quickly, you might think that make your choice could be a good choice on him, or other insta-down perks could work on him. Don't do it. Don't do it. You want perks that help you slow down the game, and you want perks that help you land your chances a little bit more frequently. That's why Enduring, Bamboozle, Spirit Fury, and the rest are often staples in Billy's builds. You don't want perks like this. There will be too many times where you get to a survivor, you can insta-down him, but you can just also chance out them anyway and just save the perk. Save it. If you only get perks that help your M1s being stronger, you are missing the essence of Billy. You will probably miss out on a lot of opportunities to get better at using his chainsaw. Another perk that you should never use on Billy is Sloppy Butcher, or anything else that applies on your M1 attacks. Any effect that applies on your M1 attacks, such as Save the Best for Last and so on. This has the same issue as the previous perk. It only works on your chainsaws, on your M1 attacks, basic attacks, and not on your special chainsaw attacks, which is what you should be going for constantly. Obviously, if you have absolutely nothing else, then by all means put it on. But you want to avoid perks like this. Another perk that you might have in your bloodbath that is absolutely not required on Billy is Brutal Strength. Brutal Strength makes you kick pallets. Also breakable walls and generators faster. The generators are not a big deal, you know. If you're kicking a generator, it's usually because you have pop or whatever. It's not a big deal if you take a little bit longer. But for pallets and breakable walls, that little speed usually helps. It's just that this killer already has a built-in pallet and wall breaking tool that can become really, really powerful with charging reduction add-ons. If you have any of those, and even if you don't, your chainsaw with a bit of prediction breaks pallets really, really fast, and brutal strength is not worth it. And another perk that I see people run on Billy that I think is unnecessary is Corrupt Intervention. Corrupt Intervention blocks away the further 3 generators from your spawn point, so that survivors cannot immediately get on generators. And if you're a slow killer, this is just so good for you. It means that you don't have to immediately rush to the furthest gen and then get there and it's already halfway completed, right? You don't have that issue. And if you're a prep killer like the Trapper or Hag, this perk is amazing because you can set up a little bit and survivors, they will not be able to do work far away. They'll be forced to come to your territory, to your turf, and eventually you'll be able to capitalize on that, right? Now, Billy is neither of these things. He's not a prep killer and he's not slow. In fact, he's very, very fast. In fact, arguably the best... I'm hearing some strange whale noises. In fact, the best thing you could do at the start of the game is to immediately beeline to the place where survivors spawn. Now, some people can do this because they know the spawns in each map very, very well, or at least they have a very, very solid grasp understanding of where survivors usually spawn. Or they put on whispers, then they go around the map, they figure out where whispers turns on, and they more or less guess where survivors spawn. If you run Corrupt Intervention, you will be chainsawing across the map, and then you'll find survivors that are around block generators. And yes, maybe if you're God Billy, you'll be able to down all of them, and then this perk doesn't even matter. But for the most part, you'll find a survivor, they'll drop a pallet, they'll vault a window, and now you'll be chasing a survivor next to 3 generators that are blocked. For the most part. And the rest of survivors will go far away, so you won't get to really snowball right off the bat, and they'll be doing gens far away from you. As opposed to being nearby, doing gens nearby, and now they have to run away, and you're wasting their time further, and you can go and pop them. And if you understand what I mean, I honestly think Corrupt is a waste of a perk on Billy. Again, if you got nothing better, it could be alright, but this is an example of a very, very good perk that covers a weakness that Billy simply doesn't have. Next up, we've got the nurse. Now, when the nurse uses her power, she teleports and then she hits. That hit is a normal M1, so it will apply anything normal M1 attacks to, such as Sloppy Butcher, which we just discussed on Billy. So all of those perks should, in theory, be good on nurse, but the best of M1 perks, say the best for last, is actually not a good perk on nurse. If you're a good nurse or you know how she works, you probably know already why. But yes, every time you use your power and you hit someone, you will absolutely gain and lose stacks from Say the Best for Last. The problem is that Say the Best for Last is a perk that reduces your recovery after a hit. You hit a survivor, normally you're very slow, they gain a bit of distance, you recover quicker. Bam, you now recover a little bit faster after you build up stacks and you can catch up to them faster. That's not a thing with Nurse. After every successful hit, after a blink, you will be fatigued. No matter what. You can use add-ons to reduce the fatigue, etc, 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 yes. But Say the Best for Last will be completely worthless in these situations. Yes, there will be the odd occasion where you hit a survivor without blinking, then you recover really fast, then you blink, then you hit them. And Say the Best for Last helps you there, but it's just never enough. Say the Best for Last, as good as it is on many other killers, worthless on the Nurse. Also worthless on the Nurse, chasing perks such as Enduring. You will never really walk through pallets like a normal killer, and Enduring doesn't protect you from any other stun, so never bother. And Bamboozle. With most of the super good windows being altered in this patch, and even the strong windows being not that much of an issue against Nurse, since she can teleport through walls, Bamboozle, Enduring, Brutal Strength, other chasing perks like that are pretty much worthless. Another set of perks that you might think is okay on Nurse is perks that reduce her terror radius or eliminate it altogether, such as Dark Devotion. Dark Devotion is really scary on some killers. I think the Nurse is not one of them. Problem with the Nurse is that if you move normally, you are extremely extremely slow. So hitting your obsession and then slowly walking towards someone else is probably a little bit too risky, not very productive. If you do not walk and use your ability instead, you will 100% either be seen or be heard, because your ability has a loud sound cue that survivors can hear from quite the distance. So be very careful with some of the stealth perks, such as Stark Devotion or Tinkerer. I think they're extremely hard to use and nurse. Next up, we've got Hunters, and what we're going to see here is a combination of perks that can be very good in other situations, but don't really work out for her. The first one, actually, is a bit special. Ira Maiden. Ira Maiden is a horrible perk, in my opinion. I would only really use it on very, very specific meme killers, but it actually has a very, very interesting utility on the Hunters. Since the Hunters has to open lockers to reload her weapon, putting Ira Maiden on, let's say along with Barbecue, makes it so that survivors can hide in lockers very effectively, and also it speeds up your reload, which usually takes like 4 seconds, I believe. I believe it might take 4 seconds. Yes, it's either 3 point something or 4 seconds. It basically cuts it down by a couple seconds, which is really, really neat and feels really, really good. Now, there are some Hunters out there who are so good and like to throw hatchets so much that Ira Maiden might work out for them. They are so confident that they don't need a fourth perk that does something more, that it could definitely be a good idea for her. And again, if you've got nothing else, by all means. But let's say that you're an aspiring hunters, you're learning, you've got quite a few perks, and you think that this that you just unlocked from Lesion is a good perk. Let me tell you, it's not. The 2 seconds that you save from each reload are nothing compared to the amount of time you're going to save with other perks that will give you information. Imagine you waste 10 seconds looking for a survivor that isn't there, and you don't know because you don't have whispers. Or imagine you waste out the equivalent of like 15 seconds going for a generator thinking that someone's there because you don't have discordance. Or you hook someone and you wander around the map and you go back to the hook and no one's there and the generator pops in distance because you didn't have barbecue. Other perks that give you information are just so much better than anything that Ira Maiden could provide to you. The insta-down on Hunters is laughable. You are very, very slow. Very rarely will you see a survivor getting to a locker nearby and then come out and then be within range for you to M1 them and insta-down them. That will happen extremely, extremely rarely. So I wouldn't bother with Ira Maiden for the insta-down aspect of her ability either. So yes, other perks on Hunters will be useful. Now, which one exactly you put as your fourth will be up to you, but Ira Maiden, I do not recommend. Another perk that I probably don't recommend, Sloppy Butcher. Sloppy Butcher used to be a top Hunter's perk. It used to apply to her hatchets, but as of the current patch, it doesn't apply to any special ability in the game at all. Anything that damages that is not your main weapon will not apply Sloppy Butcher, and as a result, you know, if you have a lucky game, you might have a survivor that comes into you, you throw a hatchet, then M1, now Sloppy Butcher is applied. Great. Another survivor comes in, you throw a hatchet, they go for a window, you smack them, Sloppy Butcher is on. Wonderful. But there will also be games where you're just using your hatchets all the time, and then Sloppy Butcher does absolutely nothing. Any M1 perks such as Sloppy Butcher, Save the Best for Last, Surge, some of these perks are useful, even good, in some killers. They're not good on Hunters. Please skip them. Now, as you know, the Hunters is very slow, as we just stated. So some people might think that the ability to be a little bit quicker could be very useful. And that's why some people will ask every now and then if play with your food is a good idea on Hunters. On paper, it sounds really good. Being able to take your 110 killer to 115 so that you can catch up to other killers and still throw hatchets is a really, really cool idea. And also, while you hold your hatchets and you're normally really slow, that 5% is actually quite useful. In fact, there is an add-on, the Shiny Pin, that many hunters regard as a pretty decent add-on. This gives you 4% extra while you hold. So if you have a single stack of play with your food, damn, it's like having even more of a Shiny Pin. That sounds great. Until you realize that throwing hatchets makes you exhaust the tokens. As a Huntress, you will be dishing out attacks left and right. You're going to be throwing hatchets, throwing hatchets, throwing hatchets, throwing hatchets. And the fact that you will never preserve your play with your food for very long is what makes it a really bad perk on her. If you put play with your food on the Cannibal, for example, and he has 2 stacks, that's 2 chances that he's going to do. And that's 2 downs that he's going to get out of each stack. With Hunters, you're going to throw a hatchet, you're going to miss it because we're hitboxes, or you're going to hit it, but then you're going to lose it. You do too many offensive actions. per minute, basically, to have Play Your Food come in and help you in any significant way. So please, learn from my mistake, don't even bother. Another excellent perk that you should probably never run on her, Infectious Fright. Infectious Fright is a great snowballing perk, and the Hunter is a snowballing killer, so it follows the logic that if you're down a survivor and someone else screams around you, you can immediately go after them, blah blah blah. It seems like, on paper again, it seems like it should be a great perk. 2 problems. 1. The Huntress is a snowballing killer who needs to reload. There will be many times where you down a survivor, someone screams, and that was your last hatchet. There's literally no point to knowing that there's a survivor there. You just cannot chase them. Maybe you already knew they were there. And 2, this is based off your terror radius, and the Huntress has a very unique humming radius, and her terror radius is actually only 20 meters. That makes the range on this very, 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 very small. Usually survivors that are within 20 meters, you know, you already know they're there because they're just trying to finish the generator last second. You don't have that much range with Infectious Fright, so even though it's not a crazy choice, probably not one I would recommend. Next up, Michael. What are some perks you should avoid on Michael? First of all, insta-down perks. They can be a bit of a meme, and obviously if you're running a tier 1 or tier 2 only Michael, then don't listen to what I'm about to say. But insta-down perks, especially the ones that you don't have any control over, such as Make Your Choice, which is triggered by the survivor, or Haunt the Ground, which is triggered by the survivor. These are perks that can very, very easily overlap with your power. They can also lull you into a sense of like wanting to save your tier 3, which you should probably not do. It would be a shame if you have Make Your Choice, and then you pop tier 3, and then Make Your Choice triggers. And you're like, oh, okay, well, I was gonna insta-down him anyway. Your power already gives you very, very adequate lethality. You will be able to down people just fine for the most part. You want perks to slow down the game on the gen side, or to, you know, be a bit better chaser on the actual chase, not the hitting side. So you might want to run something such as Bamboozle or such as Modron Abuse to get the drop on people. You don't need the instant down perks. Next up, Enduring. Enduring is not a horrible perk on Michael, don't take me wrong, but if you have to choose between Enduring and Brutal Strength, or Enduring and literally anything else, please choose literally anything else. As a Michael, you will rarely want to be stunned by a pallet. One very effective thing you can do is to pretend that you're about to get to the pallet, you're about to get the hit, but if you know that they're gonna get the drop, instead of swinging or eating it, you can just literally walk up to it, stop, and begin to stalk. And during the animation of drop in the pallet, you're gonna get a good half a second to a second of stalk, depending where they run after. Because you're gonna be respecting pallets and stalking over the pallet, Enduring, I think, is a bit of a waste of a perk, in my opinion. If you want a perk that will help you a ton, when you pop tier 3 and survivors are pre-dropping pallets left and right and going for windows as much as they can, then Bamboozle or Brutal Strength are probably a better idea. Another perk that might backfire on him is Knockout, or any other ideas of snowballing and slugging too much. Now this Knockout was a perfectly good Michael perk, probably some year or months ago, but I believe the meta is shifting too much. When you pop tier 3, that is something that cannot be easily undone. You've already used one of your tier 3s. It's gonna wear out soon, and you've already consumed a lot of your power to get there. It is not very wise to slug massively these days, because a lot of people are running Unbreakable. Unbreakable is extremely common, and trying to go for a massive slug build can backfire quite easily. Some of the teams that you play against, they're not going to be that great. You would have killed them anyway. Some of them will bring very strong perks. They'll bring Decisive and Unbreakable, Decisive and Unbreakable, Decisive and Unbreakable. And it's not crazy at all to find 2, 3, sometimes 4 Unbreakables in a game. And this will obviously fail if they're on comms, and it will obviously fail if they have tons of Unbreakables. So don't bother. Now, Save the Best for Last, again, is a really good perk, and it's Michael's own perk, so you're gonna see a lot of people run this. If you're running a tier 2 Myers, where you just focus on double tapping people, this could absolutely work, and I've done it before. However, if you are going to pop your tier 3 very early, Save the Best for Last is not the best perk that you want to bring. Popping tier 3 early and popping tier 3 as soon as possible is actually a very, very fine and good thing to do with Michael, depending on your perks, of course. And in that situation, Save the Best for Last is not really helping you that much. Save the Best for Last shines where you hit a survivor, and you need to hit them again because they're doing an unhooking in front of you, or they're just running to a corner of the map and you're catching up really quickly. If you insta-down the survivor, Save the Best for Last, probably not the best perk to run, so be warned. Next up, we have the Hag. The Hag is an insanely strong killer, and look at these perks, man. These perks are all incredible. You could put this build on Billy or on Nurse, and it would be close to the best that you can run. You have Discordance, Barbecue, Infectious, and Pop. These perks are great, so why do I not recommend them on the Hag? All of these perks are very proactive perks. Perks that let you know where survivors are, what they're doing, or that force you to go a certain place, do certain something that, you know, impedes the survivor's progress. That's not the playstyle of the Hag. As a Hag, you are extremely happy to start the game and put 7, 8, 9, 10 traps on a part of the map and just straight up give up a gen or two. Or wait, you know, with corrupt intervention until survivors start stepping onto your territory. It is completely fine to let them do a gen or two and still win the game. You will see discordance pop off in the distance, and it will be the right thing to completely ignore it. With other killers, such as Billy, if you see discordance, get your chainsaw running, you're gonna go there, and you're gonna disturb two people. That's the best thing you can possibly be doing. Not with Hag. With Hag, you will often want to ignore people. For that reason, having the information that two people are working on a gen as a Hag is sometimes just not needed. Same with Barbecue. You hook a survivor and now you have 70 million traps all around his hook. You honestly don't give much of a shit if someone is doing a gen in the other corner of the map. You know they're going to finish it, but you also know that eventually they're all going to die around the place where you're setting up. You're not going to go through the entire map working very slowly to try and catch up to them in a place where there's pallets, there's windows, and you haven't set any of your traps. So Barbecue and Chili, it's okay on Hag for points. It's okay to find the last survivors if you slug a bunch. It's okay to get an idea where survivors might come from, but other perks would help you more. Infectious Fright. Infectious Fright, again, is a snowbally perk on a snowbally killer. But the thing about the Hag is that she's not a killer that goes out of her way to chase people. Instead, her snowballing comes from the survivors stepping on traps. For that reason, if you want to interrupt people, Infectious Fright is not your perk. Nurse's Calling would probably be a much better choice, or anything else, really. Instead, you will just be placing traps, they'll be stepping on them. If you hear someone scream and he's relatively close, it's not like you're a spirit or a nurse where you can just immediately go to them and down them very quickly. If they have traps around them, you will find them, probably. If they don't have traps around them, it's not worth chasing them. It's not a crazy perk, especially if you run it with like Monitor and Abuse so that you get a bit more range out of it. Remember that she has a small terrorist as well, of 24 meters. But I do not recommend it, especially for a beginner Hag. And next up is Pop, and this perk is so good. It's so incredibly good that not recommending it on a killer almost seems weird. But again, even the final generators will be easy to defend without Pop when you have people around you hooked and on the ground. Hag's playstyle is not gen patrol, gen defense oriented in my opinion. Her playstyle is murder oriented. For this reason, these perks I do not recommend on her very much. If you want to run one of them, that's completely fine, but don't run the same build that you would put on other killers. It's not what she shines at. Next up, we have the Doctor, and as you'll see, we have a bunch of perks. One of them, his own perk, Monitor Abuse, the Nemesis and Tinkerer, that I do not recommend on him unless you know what you're doing. All of these perks mess with his terror radius. Monitor Abuse makes it smaller when he's not in a chase, then bigger when he is. And Nemesis, and many people don't realize this, many people run Nemesis and Play Your Food, or Nemesis and whatever. Many people don't realize that Nemesis makes the person that triggers it oblivious. Oblivious people will not be affected by your terror radius, and as a result, you will not be able to use a static blast on them. Meaning that if you have Nemesis, and someone pallet stuns you, or someone blinds you at a pallet or whatever, that person, for another 60 seconds, is completely immune to your power. Which kind of sucks, because maybe you want to put them in tier 3 so they can use their flashlight or whatever. So be very careful. Tinker runs into a similar problem. Let's say that you want to put everyone in tier 3 to prevent them from last second finishing a generator, right? Because they can work on generators if they're on tier 3. And you walk to them, you begin your charge, and then they hit 85% progress on their generator, and your terror just vacuums into nothing. Now you don't have a power when you kind of need it the most. It is a shame, but don't run Tinker. And the problem with Monotone Abuse is that sometimes you want to find survivors, and having an even smaller territories when you're not finding anyone might not let you shock as many people as you'd like. Finally, we have Enduring. Now, as we've said, Enduring reduces the stun time, where you get hit by a pallet, and that's about it. And when does really Enduring come into play? There are situations where the survivor is already really, really far away from you, and if they know you have Enduring, and they know you're a doctor, they're probably going to drop the pallet. They're just going to drop the pallet. And if they're too close, you're going to hit them, and if they're smart, they're going to keep running, they're not going to drop the pallet. Enduring is for those middle situations where they're like really, really close, but not close enough to like guarantee you get the hit. That's where Enduring really shines. And that's where the doctor's power actually comes into place in the first place. So you probably don't need Enduring on Doctor very much. People will be pre-dropping pallets. That's why you probably might want to run Burrow Strength instead, or something else entirely. Most situations like that where survivors kind of in that middle ground, you can just, you know, zip, shock, and they don't get to draw the pallet. And that's it. You don't need to eat the pallet. You don't need Enduring. Next up, we've got the Cannibal. Now, the Cannibals is a killer that many people consider as very, very weak. And the reason why he's considered weak is that using his Chainsaw is really hard. Survivors will often go through windows and drop pallets, and it will always, you know, for a beginner Bubba, it will always seem like survivors have too much safety, and you never get the chance to use your power properly. That's why Cruel Limits, which completely blocks all the windows on a generator that's been finished, seems like a decent idea on this particular killer. If survivors only have windows and pallets, and you deny them of windows, then Cruel Limit seems like, wow, seems like a pretty good deal, right? Every now and then you're gonna chase a survivor and they're gonna have nothing around them. Wow, that seems pretty good. No, it is absolutely not good. First of all, the Cannibal is probably the one killer that survivors do not greet gens against. If you're a Wraith and you go to a generator and survivors are finishing it, they will wait for you to uncloak and they will just stay there, and then they'll take the hit and then they'll finish the generator. They cannot do that with Bubba. Very rarely will generators be done right in front of your face where Cruel Limits could come into effect. Survivors will often just, you know, run for safety and finish generators when you're far away. More so than with other killers anyway. But even if you get Cruel Limits to proc, first of all, in many maps, windows are non-existent. There are very, very few windows, and it's just all about pallets. This perk helps you in absolutely nothing. Obviously, if the gen that's finished is away from you, this perk absolutely does nothing for you. And overall, even though the idea seems right on paper, the perk itself is so fucking bad that it's just not worth running. If you hate windows with a passion, Bamboozle is an okay choice as a replacement instead. Now, another problem that many Bubbas run into is when survivors juke their Chainsaw by hopping into a locker. That's why many of them think that Ira Maiden is actually a pretty good deal, right? Imagine this. You're chasing a survivor. You start swinging your Chainsaw. And when you're about to hit that Claudette, the sneaky bitch just whoop, hops into a locker. Now, you just wait it out. She comes out of the locker and ha! M1, you're down. Haha, gotcha. No, that should never happen. First of all, the thing you should be doing as a survivor is get extremely close and begin to rev your Chainsaw when you're literally clipping into their model. I'm not even exaggerating. In this situation, when you begin to swing your Chainsaw, you will hit them immediately. If at that point, where you're about to release it, they're next to a locker, the simplest thing you can do is just to anticipate it, keep chasing them for a bit longer. If they don't go for the locker, then you let go and eventually you catch them, even if you lost like a second. And if they go into the locker, you press M1, the attack button, you cancel the power, then you open it, or they try to come out and you grab them, and that's it. You anticipate their juke and you catch them, no problem. There are some situations, and it's just a few, where they might still be able to like somehow avoid you and get into a locker. What you do in those situations is you wait last second, then bump into the locker before you're your swings end, and then you go into a tantrum. And at the end of the tantrum, survivors have a very, very, very small window to get out. If you're playing against a god survivor, he might be able to squeeze out of through this little frame, and you might not be able to get anything other than an M1. But I can guarantee you that 9 out of 10 survivors, if not more, will fuck it up, because the timing is actually really, really hard. So if someone goes into a locker, bump into it, wait in front of it. If they have head on and they come out, you will kill them, I tell you. And if they come out after the thing, you will be able to grab them more often than not. Ira Maiden is a waste of a perk. It is true that with barbecue, it does allow you to, like, you know, hook someone, look around, and probably no one's going in the locker because you have Ira Maiden. But it is a waste of a perk otherwise. Another perk that comes with Cannibal, other than barbecue, that you might be tempted to run is Franklin's. Many bubbas, they have no other perks, right? And they see one flashlight in the lobby and they immediately slap Franklin's on their builds. Bad idea. As a Cannibal, yes, sometimes you will be forced to M1 people, and that's all you can do. But your main goal is to hit people with your Chenso. Having a perk that only works against items and only works if you don't chainsaw them is, I think, a bad idea. It will make you hit people that you normally should have been a little bit more ambitious against, and sometimes it will just straight up not work. Unless you really know what you're doing and you have a great idea that everyone has like 7 keys or something, don't run Franklin's. It's the worst of a perk. Another perk that really gives you away, Iron Grasp. I see many bubbas running Agitation and Iron Grasp. And Iron Grasp is... Agitation, many survivors will never even realize you have it. But Iron Grasp is a very obvious that you do have it, because your bar, when you try to wiggle, becomes red. If you're gonna camp in the basement and you put an Iron Grasp, it makes it very obvious what you're doing, and it will give you away very quickly. It's not a terrible perk as per se, Elbow. I think it's not great. But if you're gonna be that kind of player, don't use a perk that makes it obvious. That's all I'm gonna say. Next up, we got Freddie, and I think I forgot to find a 4th perk for Freddie. We could come up with one on the fly. First of all, terror radius perks on Freddie, such as Infectious, Dark Devotion, Monitor Abuse. They are bad. They are very bad. Infectious Fright, normally an amazing perk, would be good on Freddie, but the thing is, when survivors are asleep, and they fall asleep both when you hit them and after 60 seconds by default, they become oblivious. And anyone who's oblivious will not scream. And anyone who's awake, they probably won't be around you. Let's just put it that way. Infectious Fright is not good on Freddie. Focus on controlling generators and using perks to let you know where to go, such as Thrilling Tremors, Discordance, Surge, Surveillance. Any other combination of perks to know where to go would be best than Infectious. Dark Devotion could be an interesting choice. But, again, half the... Let's assume... And honestly, it's not quite like this, but let's assume that half the players are going to be awake and half the players are going to be asleep. The asleep players will always hear your lullaby, even if you have Dark Devotion on. That's why Monitor Abuse is also such a hit or miss. You want people to be awake, you want people to be asleep as often as possible, which means you want people to completely disregard the use of this perk as much as possible. Monitor Abuse will help you get the first hit against someone, maybe, while they're still asleep at the start of the game, and might help you sneak up to someone occasionally when they are asleep. But if they're on comms or if they're constantly being asleep, all perks related to terror radius are, in my opinion, not worth it. If I had to go for another perk that was a bad idea on Freddie, probably a perk like Agitation would have been very good. For example, you can teleport. You don't need to secure the best hooks ever. So you can just hook someone and then teleport as fast as possible. Maybe Agitation is not a good perk. Some people put on Brutal Strength. Honestly, yeah, I'm not gonna lie. Any bad perk on Freddie is bad, but some of the decent ones even could work out on Freddie. Don't run Third Seal to prevent people from seeing their clocks. They can still see them. And yeah, honestly, I maybe... obviously, don't run anything like Insidious, because they'll still hear a lullaby, but yeah, that's probably all for Freddie. Now, Pig. Why? Why do I have Discordance here as well? Discordance is actually an amazing perk, and I even think that it's not bad on Pig. Discordance on Pig is not bad, but there's one thing that you must realize about Discordance. Discordance only works when 2 people work on gens, and the pig is probably the killer that makes survivors split up the absolute most out of any other killer, other than maybe Lesion. Why is this? Very simple. You will have a survivor that, for the most part, you know, throughout the game, you will most likely have a survivor that is busy doing the jigsaw box searches. One survivor that is busy being chased, and the other 2 survivors will very rarely be on the last gen together. Because survivors will tend to split up and do gens by, by themselves, it is not crazy at all to run Discordance, have it work in the first gen, and then have it work again in the final gen, and never again throughout the match. It is a great perk, don't take me wrong. You could maybe replace it with Barbecue, you can maybe replace it with Thrill and Tremors, if you want to control gens and keep an idea of where everybody is at a time. But I don't think it's that great on Pig, or at least if you use it on Pig, you must know of this one weakness of her. Next up is Dying Light. Dying Light also has I think it's a very mediocre perk, but it has a weakness that you must consider as well. So Dying Light basically gives a massive buff to the Obsession in terms of healing. As you can see, the Obsession can heal other people much faster, 33%. That's pretty much like a survivor perk right here. It's like Body Knowledge, right? So it gives them a healing buff and also an unhooking buff. Anything they do to other survivors, right? Not to themselves. And then, to every other survivor, so the non-obsession survivors, they get a small debuff that becomes bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger as you hook more and more people. Now, the problem with the pig, for the most part, is that your early game is not spectacular. You don't always get a grab. Your early game could be hard. And then your late game, where people are busy with their traps and stuff, is out of the okay. You don't need a perk to help you when you're out of the strong there. And that does absolutely nothing for your early game. In fact, it could work against your early game. If you hit 2 survivors and then the Obsession can heal one of them very quickly, that obviously doesn't help you. But why is Dying Light particularly bad on pick, in my opinion? Let's look at it this way. There are 4 survivors, right? The Obsession is not affected by Dying Light, and we don't want to chase the Obsession. If we chase the Obsession, we don't power up Dying Light, and we don't get tokens on it. So the Obsession, we're never going to go for. That's just... And obviously, he's completely unaffected. Now, I go for Survivor A, right? And I put a trap on his head. Now, this guy, by very definition of the pig's power, is busy, will probably die if he does nothing, and will have to go search boxes, which, by the way, are unaffected by Dying Light. So this guy, he is completely busy doing that. He's not affected by Dying Light. Now, there's 2 people left. I'm going to chase one of them. And obviously, since I'm chasing this guy, he's not affected by Dying Light either. Because, you know, he's vaulting, he's running, he's dropping pallets. Those are actions where Dying Light doesn't really affect them in any way. So this guy is not affected. And now I have one fucking guy that's affected by Dying Light at any time throughout the game. I think this is terrible. It's normally quite bad, but on other killers it can make more sense. If I put Dying Light on Lesion, or on Plague, for example, we'll get to that. Then you have a guy that's being chased, the Obsession, and then 2 guys that are being slowed down by Dying Light. And if those 2 guys are injured and they have to heal and then they have to do gens, then the Dying Light can start to get up there. But on a pig, I would never run it. Make your choice. You've seen this perk a little bit. Make your choice is a great perk. It can work good on Hack, it can work good on Wraith, it can work good on killers that can find people easily, such as, you know, Doctor, or who can teleport across the board, such as Freddie, or have good mobility, you know, such as Neuro's Spirit. Not so good on the pig herself. The pig herself is very, very slow when she goes into stealth. Does not have any capabilities to find people easily, unless you have perks to back you up. And yes, even though you should absolutely not tunnel the person off the hook, that doesn't mean that you should go for the person that went for the unhooking. That person's not doing gens, you should probably go for someone else. And this perk is just so hard to use in some maps where the pig out of these struggles, just farm maps where people do an unhook and they just disappear forever. It's not a horrible perk, but understand that it is really hard to use on pig, and that you will not trigger it if you hit with your dash. Your dash does no longer count as an M1 attack. So if the survivor that you're chasing is in a place where you could only get them with your power by using a good roar, then make your choice. It's even less useful. consider running it if you've got nothing better, but this probably shouldn't be a staple of your build. Next up, Third Seal. Third Seal seems like a great chosen pick. You go around, you slap people a little bit, you put a trap on someone. Ha 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 ha. Now they can't find their teammates that I put on the hook because they don't see the aura of the survivor on the hook. Oh, and they can't find the jigsaw boxes because they're blind. Ha 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 ha. But before you stroke your cat, don't do that. Let's go a little bit back. Third Seal makes them blind, but there's two critical things that this perk misses. One, when you hook a survivor, there is a action bubble that every other survivor can see pointing in the direction of the hook. So this does not work to prevent them from saving people from hooks, and it's not going to delay their unhooking if you are counting on that to activate a trap somehow. And also when they get off and they look for traps, those traps will be highlighted no matter what, even if they are blind. So Third Seal is a bad perk, and it has zero special synergies with the pig. Also, Hunter's Lullaby does not make the jigsaw search have harder skill checks, by the way. Neither does the perk Unnerving Presence. So any of those perks that you thought might be good to make it impossible for survivors to get the traps off just do not work. If you want more punishing or more time-consuming jigsaw searches, you'll have to resort to add-ons instead. Next up, we got the Clown. Now, the Clown is a really, really hard killer to master, and it's really hard to do well with him because, in my opinion, he is the weakest killer in the game. The biggest weakness of Clowns are pallets, which might make you inclined to run Enduring. Again, on paper, it sounds good. If his weakness is pallets, then why would you not run Enduring, right? So you can play around pallets more effectively. Well, the thing is, his biggest weakness is not pallets. His biggest weakness is pre-drop pallets, or pallet camping, or early pallet drops, however you want to call them. With the Clown, if you are sitting on the pallet and the survivor is trying to loop you, in most scenarios, you can put a very well-placed bottle, and that will result in a hit before the survivor goes around and makes it to the pallet to drop it. Especially if you're running the Flask of Bleach add-on, which reduces the survivor speed even more. For that reason, it is a really, really good thing for the survivor when he gets to a pallet to just straight up drop it. That's what good survivors will do. Bad survivors, you can catch anyway. Good survivors know how weak the Clown is in this regard, and what they'll do once they get to a pallet is they'll just straight up drop it. If you want to combat this, you could run Enduring and Spirit Fury, or you could run Brutal Strength. That way, if they pre-drop the pallet, you just break it a little bit quicker, and that's not a horrible choice on the Clown, honestly, Brutal Strength. Enduring and Spirit Fury is a bit of an overcommitment to one thing, but it could work. But Enduring by itself will probably not get you too many results against the good players. Again, because they will just be pre-dropping pallets. Also, if you have Enduring and Spirit Fury, and they manage to pre-drop every single pallet, you will basically have two worthless perks. If they're on a Survivor Friends, and they suspect that you have it, or they find out that you have it early, you'll have every single survivor pre-dropping pallets all the time. That is awful for you. Yeah, you'll break up all the pallets, but by the time they've run out of them, they will all be by the exit gates, pressing control repeatedly. Questionable idea. Find other more reliable perks. Now, we've explained how the Flask of Bleach makes the debuff of the bottle of the gas even stronger. It makes survivors move 5% slower, down to 20 instead of 15, minus 15, which is really, really good. So you might be thinking, wow, if that 5% is really good, why wouldn't I run Play With Your Food? Because that's pretty much like having a Flask of Bleach by default when I have stacks. True. When you throw a bottle, even in this patch, don't be fooled. I know it says special attack, but a special bottle is not, like, a bottle's not a special attack, it's just a special whatever. Special attacks are Huntress, shreds, dashes, but don't worry, this does not, the thing has changed, but this does not consume a Play Your Food token. So you drop a bottle, Play With Your Food, if you have a token, you still keep it. So yeah, why wouldn't you use Play With Your Food? Very simple. First of all, you have zero abilities to find the obsession more quickly than you would with any other killer. you are slow. You have to reload and are even slower, and you don't have any ability to whatsoever to just find the obsession more quickly, like say the doctor can, for example. And you don't even have the privilege of running Nemesis to create obsessions. If I'm playing Bubba, I can chase a survivor through a pallet, bring up my Chenso, and that motherfucker has to drop the pallet 100%, or he goes down. And then I force him to become my obsession and get a stack of play with your food with Nemesis and play with your food, right? This will not work on Clown. You do not have that kind of pressure. Survivor will pre-drop pallets and not even stun you. So, because you cannot get stacks very quickly, and because you lose them so fast, play with your food, even though it's a neat little perk, does not work for him for the most part. Next up, Nurse's Calling. Nurse's Calling is actually an amazing perk. Two problems with it, though. First of all, the Clown has a standard 32 meter terror radius, which means that any survivor that can be seen by Nurse's Calling will hear your terror radius, and probably they will not heal or begin to heal within your terror radius, unless they're picking someone out from the ground or some other situation like that, right? Two, Nurses allows you to catch up the survivor and use your power to catch him quickly, like Nurse or Spirit, for example. Clown sometimes does not have this luxury. Just like Hunters, if he runs out of bottles, he is a pretty much useless killer. And being able to capitalize on seeing someone injured is hard on Clown sometimes. But the most difficult part about Nurses is that Nurses relies on everybody being injured around the map constantly. This can be the case for a good Hunters. It can be the case for a good insta-down killer, like Billy, where he insta-downs a couple people. Now they pick themselves up, everybody's injured. Maybe you hit an M1 here and there. If you're in that situation with Clown, either you're doing amazing and other perks will help you more, or you're not doing so hot and you're just getting injuries, but no one's really going down. With Clown, perks that allow you to seal the deal are infinitely better. You won, Devour Hope, Haunt the Ground, Make Your Choice, Know It. Any perks that allow you to just get one hit and make that count are just so much better. One of the problems with Clown that you'll struggle with is that you're chasing one person and you might down them quicker or slower, but you do not have the ability to split pressure. You can't find a survivor like Lesion, injure another, then cancel your power, then injure a third, then find the fourth, and now everyone's kind of healing, injured, repairing, and so on. You do not have that ability to get everybody injured. And for that reason, in your very rough games, I think Nurse's Calling will let you down and should not be a staple of your build. Next up, Bamboozle. Bamboozle is the Clown's own perk, and it's a perfectly fine perk to run if you've got nothing better. However, as we've said, the biggest weakness for Clown are his pallets, not so much the windows, actually. Don't mind me. I was just thinking, what if I talk this whole time without recording? But no, it seems like we're good. But yeah, windows are actually not the biggest deal. You can slow down survivors with windows. For the most part, if survivors play around windows, you can't get hits. The odd dead heart here and there can hurt you, but Bamboozle is not something you want. You don't want people to be afraid of windows and then go to pallets, because that's when they really have the upper hand. Make them feel safe at windows, put a good butter here and there, and you get a hit. Other perks will help you more than Bamboozle on Clown, in my opinion. Next up, we got Spirit. Now, Spirit, just like Hag and just like Hunters, is a little bit slower. And you also might be tempted to run Play With Your Food on her. To make her movement speed catch up to normal killer so that she can, loop. And also, if you face, that speed, gets added up to whatever you're facing. So if you face at 176.5% movement speed, which is the base, with this, you'll go at 180 something. Wow, that seems pretty good. No, it's not. First of all, with Spirit, you're going to be hitting a ton of people. You're going to be facing, hitting, missing, hitting, facing, hitting, whacking a pallet and missing. You're going to be doing a lot of hits, meaning you're going to lose a lot of Play With Your Food. Play With Your Food helps when a killer is slow and their abilities are slow. Especially, we're talking about killers such as the Cannibal, right? The Spirit moves so incredibly fast when she uses her ability. Same as like Nurse or even Hag who teleports. That having this 5% extra movement speed is completely irrelevant. It's really not that good. If you want to phase a little bit quicker, there are add-ons that do that. The Dirty Uwabaki makes her move the equivalent of like... Is it 26 or 22? It's several times what Play With Your Food does. and so does the other add-ons that are a little bit worse than that. I believe it's 26% or 22% if my memory serves me right. Whereas this is only 5% per token. Not a good idea. You're not gonna find the obsession all that often, and when you do get stacks, you really truly don't need them. Next up, Predator. This is a perk that's great if you're a beginner. Following scratch marks can be a bit tricky. Predator makes them all really tight together. So when you see a survivor run away, you just use your power and follow the pretty much straight line that they'll lead right into them and hit them. Now, why do I think this perk is bad for literally anyone else other than a complete beginner that has nothing else? Finding survivors with scratch marks is not a huge deal. You follow the scratch marks and eventually you listen to their cries of pain, their steps, their grass, their anything visual cue that they might leave, and then you catch them. Being able to see the scratch marks a little bit tighter is not a huge deal, and the drawback of this perk is actually huge. Many times survivors run across the map to go for saves, to cleanse totems, to sneak up from gen to gen, and they leave scratch marks on debris, on poles, on walls, on trees, everywhere that you can see. Right? This also happens during chase when they try to get away from you. With this perk, the scratch marks spawn so tightly together that they're going to be concentrated entirely on the ground for the most part. This means that if there's any grass or if you're a little bit far away, those scratch marks are fucking impossible. This perk on an experienced killer is actually a massive hindrance because survivors will just suddenly disappear. And then you'll look at the grass and you'll see that there's scratch marks hidden underneath the grass that you can't see, and they're not anywhere else. It will make your tracking much harder. For the most part, don't run it. Next up, Dying Light. One of the worst things you can have as a spirit is one thing that helps survivors heal. Keeping survivors injured makes them vulnerable if they don't have Iron Will, obviously, because they give off a really loud noise that is super easy to track. And that's where you want to keep them as a spirit. For that reason, having Sloppy Butcher is a great idea. Having Nurse's Calling is a great idea. Anything that helps you, even Blood Echo, anything that punishes survivors, Thana, anything that punishes survivors and makes their healing a little bit harder, will be a good idea. Dying Light will make one survivor heal faster, and that will be the thing from the very beginning. It will not help you. I think Dying Light is a bad perk. Think about it in those terms. Is this going to help survivors heal? Dying Light does. Avoid it. Another perk that you should avoid, by the way, is Bloodhound. Now, there are many people that run the Father's Glasses, and they think that this is a neat combo. Bloodhound and Father's Glasses. With Father's Glasses, when you use your power, you can see the blood of these survivors. And with Bloodhound, the blood stays on longer and is much brighter. So it seems like a great combination. Until you realize that even if you don't use Bloodhound, for some reason, the blood is already bright, as if you had the perk. Try it yourself, use Father's Glasses, and you'll realize that the blood is a super bright shade of pink, just as if you were running Bloodhound. Running a perk for just 4 seconds extra of like blood tracking is not worth it, and it already comes included, so don't do that. The final perk that you probably shouldn't run is Dark Devotion. When survivors are not within your terror radius, which is by default is 24 meters, they will hear a whooshing sound, and you will not be able to sneak up to a survivor using your power, like say Lesion. Lesion can, for example, or other killers can, without giving a very loud sound cue. For that reason, if you hit the obsession and you try to use your power, you're going to be hurt. You're not going to be able to really sneak onto it. Just like Nurse, perks that hide your terrorists like Tinker and this can actually kind of backfire. So I would say be careful and avoid them. Next up, we've got Lesion. And just like Billy, Lesion has quite the adequate mobility. And more so than Billy, he can actually benefit from survivors being close together, especially when they're in a tight part of the map where they cannot easily spread out. Now, this happens in a number of places, right? Sometimes when they're coming out of the basement, or out of any unhooking situation, you have 1 or 2 or 3 survivors, 2 or 3, or maybe all 4 survivors, all grouped up. These are excellent chances to use your power, get them all injured, stall a lot, and then commit to one of them later. One of the best times to disrupt survivors like this is at the start of the match. Survivors spawn in on the shack, there's 3 of them, they start doing a generator, and then the Legion comes there, and one of them starts running, they get stabbed, the other one starts running, but they're in a corner of the map, so they can't go anywhere, then you stab them, and then you catch up to the third one. Bam! 3 people injured. This will never, ever happen with corrupt intervention. One of my biggest realizations after playing Lesion is that a good start is very, very significant in how the rest of the game can go. And corrupt intervention actually hurts you in this regard. Because survivors will not be able to gens right away when they spawn, you will have a healthy mix of survivors doing totems, survivors going to the basement for chats, survivors hiding around and going for one generator. They're going to split up a lot more and be a lot more unpredictable, which makes it really, really hard to chain hits early on. Before they find out that you're Lesion, survivors have no reason to split up for the most part. So you actually want survivors to stick together at the beginning and then be like, oh shit, it's a Lesion. Oh shit, we're all hit. Corrupt intervention works against that, and even though it's a really good perk, it's probably not the kind you want to run on Lesion. Other perks can actually help you a lot more, and there's a great dose of other perks, great amount of other perks that will help you more instead. But we'll get into those good perks in another video. Corrupt intervention, not a must on Lesion, absolutely not. It will make your early game a lot harder to predict, and also you might end up chasing people on generators that are blocked, where you really are not really bothering anyone else. With Lesion, you don't want survivors to have an additional reason to split up, which corrupt intervention just straight up gives. Another one. Some people understand that when you stab a survivor, you will see other survivors within your terror radius. Your terror radius by default is 32 meters. When you use your Lesion power, it actually increases a little bit. It's never explained in the game, but it does. So when you stab someone, and you're using your power, you have a terror radius that's over 32 meters. Some people think that if you put on distressing, that little extra distance is amazing to see even further beyond and then find everybody. It is not. Survivors that are at 32 meters or even close to 32 meters are definitely 100% too far. You will never be able to hit a survivor, see someone at the edge like 30 or 40 meters away, and then run into them and still catch them. They will definitely outrun you. And then when everybody is injured, distressing is going to be such a big warning and such a big hindrance to your quote-unquote ability to catch them off guard, to your ability to sneak up on them, that it's going to make it 100 times harder to play. Do not run distressing. If you want to find survivors who are far away, the Lesion pin, which is the item that I'm missing, gives you perfect information on everybody. There's also, I believe it's Susie's mixtape, Susie's mixtape, that gives you 60 meters extra detection past your terror radius, which is actually pretty cool if you want to find people. The best thing you can do is stab a survivor, walk around a little bit, find them with your terror radius, and then cancel your power and go and find them normally. You could run monitor and abuse for this, although I do not recommend it, at least from experience. It doesn't seem as reliable as you'd like. Don't mess around with your terror radius, basically. And that's why furtive chase is another horrible perk on Lesion. You might be tempted to run furtive chase because maybe you're drunk, maybe you got nothing else, maybe you'll have a cool, cute little obsession changing build. Remember that if they are not affected by the terror radius, they will not be shown up in they won't show up in your frenzy. That's why you probably don't want to make them oblivious. I believe if they're oblivious, they don't show up. And also, that's why you don't want them to be outside of your terror radius by making it smaller. Furtive chase makes your terror radius smaller. First of all, it's an obsession perk. You don't want an obsession perk if it's not really required. But on top of that, we already explained why. On top of that, you will hit a survivor, be in a chase, and then your terror radius will be even smaller. Which means that, yeah, okay, survivors, you might not be able to catch a survivor that's like 30 meters away, but it's good to know that he's there, right? And this perk will just hurt you when you need it, and then when you're out of your chase, your terror radius will become big again. So you get the worst of both worlds. You get big terror radius when you want to sneak up on people, and then small terror radius when you're in a chase and you actually want to find other people. Horrible perk. Do not ever run it. And then we got Coulrophobia. Coulrophobia is not a perk that people run on Lesion by themselves. Some people, they run Sloppy instead to slow on the game. They run all the slowdown perks in Sloppy, which I don't recommend, by the way. Sloppy doesn't affect your Feral Frenzy, so don't run Sloppy. unless you got nothing better. But some people think that it's a really, really good idea to use the Lesion pin, which makes your terrorist cover the entire map while you are running in Frenzy, and then combine it with Coulrophobia. Or even Overwhelming Presence, which makes them consume items faster, or even... what is the other name? Blah, 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 blah. Unnerving Presence, which makes them have more skill checks, and the skill checks are harder. These perks are pretty bad. But Coulrophobia is actually not a horrible idea on some other killers. In some other builds. It's actually a decent situational niche perk. Why is it bad on Lesion though? First of all, when you're using your power, you do not have the ability to down anyone. No one is going to heal in front of your face while you're using your power. Furthermore, I would dare to say, no one is going to heal across the map while you're using your power. If they were healing, they will get a little prompt with the Coulrophobia icon saying, ha, you're slowed down now. What do you think they're going to do? They're going to stop healing, they're going to go back to the gen, and 3 seconds later when your thing stops, then they're going to start healing again if they want to. Or maybe they'll stop healing altogether and just focus on gens, in which case you're kind of fucked. Coulro does not work. Because your ability to keep your terror radius for the entire map is so time limited, the effects of this are just 100% not worth it. Coulrophobia can work okay on some killers, like say Oni, who are super aggressive, and you're downing people left and right, and they can't heal in front of you, they can't pick themselves up from the ground in front of you very quickly, because Coulro makes it a bit slower. In those situations, it's an okay perk. Other than that, I would not run it, and certainly not on Lesion for the purpose that we just explained. Oh, sorry, I couldn't switch to the next killer. Next up, Plague. Now, Plague is a great killer with perks that you should definitely not run on. Sloppy Butcher. Sloppy Butcher only applies when you hit a survivor with your main attack. It does not apply if you injure them with your red puke. And it does not apply, obviously, if you injure them fully with your green puke. The Bio Purge. Now, even if you do want to hit survivors with your main attack, which you'll be doing every now and then, Sloppy Butcher is worthless. Survivors will do one of two things against the Plague. One, they will stay injured the entire match. Or two, they will stay injured as long as they can and then cleanse in a pool of devotion, which immediately heals them up. And it doesn't matter if you have Sloppy Butcher or any other debuff to healing, it will completely bypass it. They will go to healthy. Sloppy Butcher, Coulrophobia, Thanophobia, anything else, it will bypass it completely. For that reason, Sloppy is a horrible perk. It will only work if you're downing people and they're picking themselves up from the ground, and this will slow them down like 0.002001 second. It is worthless. Don't run it. For the same reason, Nurse's Calling is bad. Nurse's Calling is perfect to find people self-caring, perfect to find people healing under the hook, even good to find people picking themselves up from the ground. That's the only thing you're going to see on the Plague. People picking themselves up from the ground when someone comes and picks them up after being slugged. In those situations, Infectious Fright is a horribly strong perk on the Plague, and it's her own perk. Run Infectious Fright, don't run Nurses. You're never going to get any use of it. People don't heal against the Plague. They either stay injured or they cleanse in pools. And cleansing in pools does not show up on Nurse's Calling, and you can hear it. It's not a big deal to know about it. You don't want Nurses. Similarly, you do not want Enduring. Now, the Plague is one of a few killers that loses her power when she is stunned with a pallet. Now, on Lesion, Enduring is actually a decent idea. Because what you can do is, you can walk to a pallet, you get stunned, then you use your power, then you vault over it, then you hit them. Or, you get to a survivor, you stab them on the pallet, you get stunned, you recover, then you go around and hit them, or break them immediately. That can be alright on Lesion. On Plague, it is not alright. When she consumes a pool of devotion, that is a great opportunity to make use of those 60 seconds by default to down the entire team if you can. You do not want to risk losing those 60 seconds, 10 seconds in, by someone dropping a pallet. For that reason, you are going to be respecting pallets, or at least making a really, really good guess if the survivor is going to drop it, to respect it, or to keep going, right? You do not want to be stunned while you're using your power. And for that reason, having a perk that works while you're using your power, that doesn't work when you're using your power, because you're not going to get stunned, you're going to avoid it, is a bad idea. So, yeah. If survivors go and drop a pallet, and they're healthy, you're probably gonna respect it and spit on them and get them injured, get them infected at least. And when survivors are being chased with your corrupt purge, enduring is just not something that you're gonna try to rely on. Another perk that you might think is good on Plague. Many people run Thanophobia and Dying Light, or Thanophobia or Dying Light. Now, Thana makes some sense, right? Survivors, because they cannot really heal themselves properly, they will be injured for a long time. And many survivors try to, like, really extend that amount of time. They try not to heal for as long as they humanly can. So Thana makes a lot of sense, right? And so does Dying Light. Dying Light, it gives a buff to survivors' healing, which they cannot use because, you know, they cannot heal against the plague. And it gives a small debuff over time to everyone other than the Obsession, right? So are these perks good on the plague? I think they are mediocre. The plague's biggest weakness is the start of the game. If at the start you find 3 survivors and you infect them all, and they haven't even touched a generator, you are going to straight up win that game. They are going to be injured very, very soon. You're going to have pressure on 3 injured survivors, then maybe a 4th, very, very quickly. And they'll either stay injured and you'll be able to punish them, or they'll start to cleanse like maniacs and you'll be able to capitalize on the cleansing and use your stronger power and snowball from there. Either way, those things will be conditioned what happens at the start. This perk, Dying Light, is a mid to late game perk that only becomes stronger later. It slows down healing, it slows down repairs, but survivors are never going to heal. Same with Thana. So Thana slows down healing, slows down repairs. If you're running Thana against a ghost, let's say that you're being, let's say that you're playing against a spirit, right? And she's got Thanophobia and Sloppy Butcher, or a Ghostface, Thanophobia and Sloppy Butcher. You're in a shitty position. You're in a really shitty position. Either you power through gens and risk going down in 1 hit, or you heal, and obviously slowing down everyone else, or you heal, and then the heal is slower, but then, you know, you go and do gens and you avoid that. With the plague, survivors do not have this issue. If they start cleansing like motherfuckers, this perk does very little for you, Thana. And Dying Light also doesn't do too much for you if you don't have a good start. And if they do stay injured, it's only affecting the repair. It's not affecting the healing and the repair. Because survivors will only be repairing against you, these perks are pretty mediocre. They will be focused on generators. For that reason, bringing things like Pop Goes the Weasel is probably a better idea. Because that's what they'll really, really be doing. As opposed to a mixed, you know, hybrid perk of Thana and Dying Light, which is like a little bit of slowdown for gens, but also a little bit of slowdown for healing. For that reason, I do not recommend them. They're too weak at the start where you need them most, and they're not strong enough by themselves. If you got nothing better though, feel free to use one of them. Ghostface. Now, is Infectious Fright a good perk on Ghostface? Many people ask me this, and the answer is no. The answer is absolutely no. Ghostface is a killer that is not about snowballing directly. You don't go for one survivor, do a sick chainsaw, and then go to another survivor, do a sick chainsaw. It's more about, you know, controlling the flow of survivors. You have a survivor that is injured, that you know is not going to come. You have a survivor that is healthy, but you've always marked them. You know that he's vulnerable if he comes, then another one comes, and you maybe grab him off a gen because he's not paying attention. You play in that sort of way. You try to anticipate what they're going to do. You don't really go on a rampage left and right. And the thing with Infectious is that Ghostface, many times, will down survivors with a 0 meter terror radius. Oftentimes, you'll be chasing a survivor who is injured, and you'll need to make a good play. You will remove your red stain by using your power, go around the corner, whack him, bam. Even if there were 16 survivors around you, dancing, you know, dancing all over you, you would not hear any of them on Infectious, because your terror radius at the time of downing him was 0. And only reappears immediately after. Because many of your downs will happen like this, Infectious Fright gets very little use out of it. Some people think that if you pair the outdoor security camera and Infectious Fright, that's a good idea, right? Because the outdoor security camera makes people that are away from your terror radius be revealed, and Infectious makes it so that people who are inside your terror radius are revealed when you down someone. I I think that if you want the effect of the other security camera, just run the security camera by itself. It only works when you mark people, though, so it's a little bit tricky. But yeah, Infectious is just straight up not worth it. Another perk that's not worth it, in my opinion, Monitoring Abuse. There are going to be two modes, for the most part, on Ghostface, right? You're either going to be not chasing people, and hopefully in stealth, right? So you'll have a 0 terror radius. Or you're going to be chasing someone, and probably you'll be revealed early on, because you'll get one hit and you reveal, or they see you and you're revealed. So you're going to go from 0 to 40-meter terror radius, where it would be best to go from 0 to 32. You don't want a perk that is going to do nothing for you when you're out of chase anyway. Don't run Monitoring Abuse. Another thing that you should definitely never ever run on Ghostface are perks to help you in a chase too much. Now, Beast of Prey is probably the most egregious choice that you could possibly bring. It doesn't really give you many points. You're already going to level up Hunter category just fine. It doesn't give you extra points at the end of the game like Barbecue does, so for the points, it's not even worth it. The Undetectable status effect and no red stain, you already get that by using your power. And this is the kind of perk that only works when you've been chasing a survivor for a long time, because it's about bloodlust. You never want to have extended chases with survivors as Ghostface for the most part. You want to, you know, get them marked, go away, get a hit, go away, hit and run, think same as Wraith. Enduring is another perk that I do not recommend on him. When you get stunned, you lose your power, which is something that you don't always want to do. It's not as bad as Plague, because you will get it eventually, and sometimes it's okay to lose your power when the survivors are already aware of your location, so you don't care. But you should not be chasing survivors into pallets blindly all the time. Another really, really nice thing that you can do at pallets that many people don't realize, it's hard to do on some pallets, but on most of them you can do it, is a similar thing that you do with Michael. A survivor gets to a pallet, you know they're going to drop it on you, so you anticipate that, and you preemptively position yourself in a way so that by the time he drops it, you're already leaning, and while they drop it and they run away, you can get 2/3 of the lean out of the way. And then if they were already a little bit stuck, that guy is fully stocked or 99 for later. Play that on pallet smart, like I just said, and don't run into them blindly with Enduring. If you want to mark a survivor and then chase them for 45 seconds wildly and swing at every pallet, I think that's a mistake. I think you will lose games as Ghostface by doing that. Survivors, if they want to play safe, they can drop pallets super early, they can play super safe, and your marking will go away before you catch them. I'm not even joking. For 45 seconds, not enough when a survivor is playing super safe. You want survivors to be a bit more clueless, to be caught a bit more off guard instead. Next up, Demo Boy. Now, Search is actually quite the underrated perk. I think it's a very okay-ish perk that could use a small buff that works really well in some builds here and there, on some killers here and there, when the rest of the build kind of complements it. I would run it, however, on killers that will always or almost always down with an M1 attack. Myers, Freddie, always downs with M1 attacks. Nurse, Trapper, if they step on a trap, you can hit them. Always downs with M1 attacks. Problem with the Demogorgon is that if you're going up against good survivors, they will run the loops super tight. And in those situations, you will need to use your power. And when you use your power, Search doesn't work. And when you don't use your power, Search is an okay perk, but it's not super strong. So even though this is an okay perk to run on the Demogorgon as a beginner, it is a perk that you should probably begin to switch up for Pop Goes the Weasel or some other perk later on as you become better, and more especially when you go against better and better survivors. Next up, we got Make Your Choice. A killer that can come back to the hook really quickly with his portal. Seems like would be a perfect candidate for Make Your Choice. Two problems. One, it doesn't work on the Shred anymore, as it used to in the PTB when it was first released. The Shred does not apply any exposed status effects, so if you have, you know, something like Noid, it's not going to work from the Shred. If you have Make Your Choice, it doesn't work on the Shred. And two, it is really awkward to use this in anything other than a basement. You, in my opinion, will not have as many chances as you think, and I think is a bit of a wasted perk. If you want the perk to increase your lethality, Save the Best for Last is a great choice. And if you want to insta-down people, Devour Hope is an interesting combination as well to try out. Make your choice, however, I think it's not worth it. You're gonna be putting someone on the hook and just like pretty much camping them. When you go through the tunnel, everyone gets a loud map-wide warning that you're doing it, and people are gonna be looking out for it. And then if you do catch a survivor and the survivor is good, he's going to force you to use your Shred, in which case, what's the point of them being exposed, right? Not worth it. Even less worth it than on Billy or even on Cannibal. Brutal Strength. Never run Brutal Strength on this color, in my opinion. His Shred takes about a second to prepare and destroys the pallet extremely quickly. Most of the times you can anticipate the pallet drop and prepare the Shred from distance, or even Shred from far away when you know the pallet is already dropped, and destroy it super fast. Brutal Strength, a waste of a perk on him. For the most part, you'll be making pallets so quickly that Brutal is barely an improvement. And next up we got Franklin's. Now Franklin's is an interesting choice. If you know that the survivors that you're going up against have very strong medkits, very strong toolboxes, whatever, you might be tempted to run Franklin's to try to make them drop it and counter it. I think it's a bad choice on Demogorgon actually, because other than these, first of all, obviously if you shred them, Franklin's doesn't work. It needs to be a basic attack. It does say it in the description. And second, items actually work against survivors in many scenarios. As a Demogorgon, one of your best cues to know when to commit to a shred is when a survivor goes near a window and their item disappears from their hand. This lets you know that they've already pressed the spacebar and that they've already committed. There are many survivors that know exactly how to run into a window until the last second and make it look like they're about to vault it, but then do a little spin to the side and then you miss it. And if you wait too long, you will lose the survivor if they do commit to it. It's a bit of a tricky situation with some shreds around some corners. If they have an item, however, this is super easy. Don't make them drop it, use it against them. Chase them towards a window. If the item doesn't disappear, you know that you shouldn't let go of shred. And if the item does disappear, that means that they've committed to the animation. Let go of shred, you'll catch them every time. Next up is Oni. Now, Insta-down perks are good on almost any killer that can run them, and Oni needs early game downs and pressure, so you might think that having something like Haunted Grounds or Make Your Choice is a great idea on Oni. No, it's not. When you insta-down a survivor, they go from the healthy to the injured to the dying state, and this gives you no progress towards your Blood Fury power. Normally, it takes 100 points. Let's say it takes 100 points to get to 100%. It takes 100 points to get to your Blood Fury. When you hit a survivor, you get about 40%. When you hit another survivor, you get about 80%. And then you pick up a bit of blood and bam, you already have it. If you down 2 survivors with Haunted Ground, you will down them, yes, but you will have no progress whatsoever towards your power, which is bad. The Oni is already very good at insta-downing survivors with his power, with Blood Fury, once he does get it. For that reason, you might want to run perks like Sloppy Butcher to slow down, which anybody should have, to slow down their healing so that they're injured for longer and that they drop more blood orbs. Having hemorrhage doesn't make them drop more blood orbs, but being injured for longer obviously does. So any perk that makes them stay injured a bit longer will be useful. Or any perk that lets you find out where they heal, like Nurses or Barbecue from a distance, will be useful. Don't try to insta-down them, however. Then we got Save the Best for Last. The Oni will very rarely go for a hit and then immediately go for another hit. Normally, you'll either go for a hit and collect blood for a long time, or you go for a hit and you'll be downing them anyway. Sometimes even you will not go for a hit and you'll just straight up use your power. In which case, Save the Best for Last is absolutely nothing. Because you're not going to be going for double hits like, say, a Freddie will. Freddie's extremely happy to go for a hit, then go for another hit super quickly. Same with Spirit. Here, you're going to be going for single hits, and you're going to be going into your power, where Save the Best for Last does not work in any capacity. For that reason, Save the Best for Last, even though it's a great perk, it is not one you should be running on Oni. It also doesn't help you in the early game when you need it most, and for the mid game, your power is more than adequate enough. You will not be running this. Next up, Mad Grid. I don't know of many killers that get feared as much as Oni when it comes to body blocking. You will very rarely have people who are injured try to take a hit because they're injured, and you will almost never have people who are healthy try to take a hit from the Oni because they understand that taking a hit is giving him already half his power if he doesn't have it already. For that reason, even if it's Survivor Friends, no Survivor Friends, solo cure, you will... If this perk is already hard to use, you'll have an even harder time using it on Oni because people will rarely try to tank a hit. So Mad Grid and other perks like that, I would tell you to avoid. And then we've got Nemesis. Now Nemesis is the Oni's own perk, and it is a perfectly okay perk to run by itself if you got nothing better, and it is a perfectly good perk to run with Play With Your Food or some other fun combinations. However, I'll put it here because some people don't realize, again, that it makes survivors oblivious. Oblivious survivors will not scream when you use Infectious Fright. Infectious Fright is easily one of the best perks on Oni, and many people will run it as a staple of the They'll run it in their build. Period. And if you run Infectious Fright, be sure not to run it along with Nemesis, or else you'll have one guy that could be right next to you that will not scream because he has the Oblivious status effects put onto him. Next up is Deathslinger. Again, Infectious Fright, great perk on other killers, not so much on the Deathslinger. Many times when you down a survivor, you will have to reload. Whoever's in your terror radius is not going to mess around because they know you could shoot them immediately. Survivors will tend to split up, and it is hard to snowball with this killer in the first place. Infectious Fright, probably not the best choice for him. Not to mention that, you know, sometimes there's a survivor there, but you still have to reload. Now, Spice from the Shadows is a perk that's not fantastic, but it's a serviceable, okay-ish perk for beginner killers that have nothing else. That being said, you should probably never run it on this killer. This killer has the unique ability to scare off crows when he shoots. So if you shoot, any crow within 20 meters just immediately flies off, making this even more useless than it usually is. For other killers like Ghostface, for example, you go into your power, maybe you stab a survivor, and someone who was very near that was hiding up until this point, they move around, they scare a crow off, and you get that info. With this killer, you're never going to have that kind of information of someone like hiding behind you or something like that you didn't pay attention to, because crows will constantly be flying around and escaping your area every time you do shoot. Another perk that you should not run is Unrelenting. If you're new to this killer, you realize that when you spear a survivor, you can actually M1, do a normal attack, miss, and then the chain breaks immediately. So you might be tempted to run Unrelenting, which can make this cooldown up to 30% at level 3, so that you can hit a survivor with your shot, cancel the attack, cancel it, and then they're injured. But the thing is, if you cancel the chain in that way, they do not get injured. Unrelenting only works if you want to cancel and then go for another attack, which happens very, very, very rarely. If the chain fully breaks, they will get the speed boost, and you will be stunned, and Unrelenting does absolutely nothing for you. Another perk that's also situationally good that you should probably never run on the Deathslinger is Bamboozle. You actually want survivors to play around windows. Windows are an extremely unsafe place to be against the Deathslinger. For the most part, if survivors is going through a window, you can shoot them if you have line of sight, or even shoot through the window itself if they're a little bit past it, and then pull them towards you and hit them through the window. If you have a perk to block windows, survivors will naturally be more inclined to play around pallets, and that's where the Deathslinger's strength resides. If survivors drop a pallet and the pallet is safe, you cannot hit through the pallet like you can through the window. So don't bring a perk that will shy survivors away from the one place where you are most dangerous, and instead bring something else to catch them off guard, or if you really hate pallets, bring something else to play around pallets. And that concludes my 19 bad builds for every killer video. Hopefully you learned something, and even though some of these things were fairly obvious, I assume to many of you, some of them might have not been. Maybe some of the things that were not so obvious will help you become a better killer. Thank you so much for watching, and stay tuned for the next video in this series, where I'll be covering a good, reliable build on every killer. So it will be the opposite of this. And I'll be seeing you then. Thank you so much for watching. See you super soon.